It's time for the 29th film in my 31 Horrors of Mike, and this time we're looking at a film which is one of my favourites of all time. It's the 1951 classic The Thing, also known as The Thing from Another World. The film itself was based on a 1938 science fiction novella by John W. Campbell, which followed a group of researchers in Antarctica who encounter an alien life form which has the ability to assimilate and replicate any animal or creature that it comes into contact with. The story itself was called Who Goes There, because basically the idea is that the researchers don't know who in the camp is still human and who is actually the thing. The film itself actually alters the story in a great many ways. John Carpenter's film in the 1982 is actually far more faithful to the original story. I will say that the story itself is much lauded. I do enjoy greatly the novella. I think it's a very good story. I don't think it's particularly well written. I think there are a lot of problems with it, but it is really worth a read, especially if you're a fan of the Thing adaptations in cinema. I'm not saying that it's terribly written. It's just I don't think that the writing helps the story in many places. But anyway, we're talking about the film. So the 1951 film was directed by Christian Nyby. Christian Nyby claims himself that he directed the film, but a lot of people attribute the movie to Howard Hawks, who was the producer and also the unofficial writer of the screenplay. And a lot of his influence can be seen in the film. If you've watched other Howard Hawks films such as Rio Bravo, you'll see the style. But Christian Nyby claims that what happened is that he just imitated Howard Hawks' style for the film because he felt he was studying under a master. The people who worked in the production themselves seem to disagree on who directed the film. Some people say it was Christian Nyby, other people say no, it was definitely Howard Hawks. So I guess we'll never know. It's kind of like the whole Tobe Hooper, Steven Spielberg situation with Poltergeist. Who directed the movie? We just don't know. But certainly in the same way that Poltergeist, we can see the influence of Steven Spielberg in that film. We can see the influence of Howard Hawks on The Thing. The story itself is relocated to Alaska, where a captain and his airmen are told to go and help this research post, this isolated research post headed by a man called Dr. Carrington, who is asking for assistance. They go accompanied by a local reporter called Scotty, played by Douglas Spencer. And when they get there, they're told by Dr. Carrington, played by Robert Cornthwaite, that he believes that there's been a UFO which has crash landed nearby. So they go and investigate, and once they investigate, they find that a UFO has indeed crash landed, and they actually find the alien frozen in the ice. So they take this big block of ice back to the remote research post, and then that was the first mistake, and then the creature thaws out and then goes on a murderous rampage. The cast in this film is really great. You know, Kenneth Tobey plays the sort of lead, the dashing lead. His chemistry with Margaret Sheridan, who plays the sort of romantic interest. The interplay between the two of them is really great. Robert Cornthwaite's great as the Doctor. Really is in many ways the villain of the piece. Douglas Spencer, the banter with him, comic relief that he offers as well as the journalist, and James Arness as the actual creature itself. You know, he does a really great job, although James Arness apparently wasn't very proud of the film, which I think is a great shame because it is a fantastic movie. I think that some of the other things they changed from the original story, and you'll notice that as well if you've watched the John Carpenter film from 1982, is that the creature itself is more vampiric in nature. It has a plant-like origin rather than ourselves have an animal origin, so it can grow back limbs and things like that much easier. It also it seems to feast on blood. So the whole idea of this thing, which can mimic the life forms that it encounters, that aspect of the story is taken away. So you're actually given this more sort of Frankenstein's monster like creature than anything else. But that doesn't really bother me too much because the whole film is just absolutely fantastic. One of the things about Howard Hawks as a director is that he dealt with dialogue fantastically well. The way people talk over one another, cutting each other off. It was a very natural way to talk. You see conversations going. Some people think it's reminiscent of the 1940s dialogue, where people are talking very, very, very quickly. But I actually like this style of dialogue. I think it works really, really well. And I think as well the group that you have, bar Dr. Carrington, who comes across as a bit of an arse, it really is a group of people that you want to be with, you would like to be around or get to know. And I think that's part of the charm of the film, is it's this isolated, remote research outpost in this very, very cold, bleak landscape, but there's a warmth from the characters and a warmth inside the structure, which makes you, it's kind of like a cozy horror feeling, which I often talk about. What's interesting about the film is that it deals with the idea of science and the military, and what's interesting about that is that this was post Hiroshima, and a lot of people in the sort of post, or in the throes of the nuclear age, a lot of people seem to have distrust of science, and Howard Hawks seems to have implied that in this film, which is that the scientists largely are seen as being like children, naive, that they really need a strong military group to harness their abilities to make sure that they don't make mistakes. I don't agree with that message at all, but I think that if you try to really just let that, in my opinion, flawed outlook, just skirt over you, don't worry about it. It's something which I think was, which was synonymous with the time more than anything else, because people were worried about the rampant progress of technology, excuse me, and science. And also this was in the 1950s, so we were really coming out of and going into the sort of mad scientist era in B movies, so there was a real fixation with that, and you can see that in that whole period of filmmaking, especially with B movies, is that a lot of it is, nuclear weapons resulting in creatures like Godzilla and things like that. There's just this idea that technology is a bad thing somehow. Interestingly though, what isn't often mentioned is that there are actually positive scientific roles in this film as well, so it does balance out a little bit. I think it's still effectively frightening, and I think as well, if you watch this film in the same way that It, the Terror from Beyond Space was very much the film which influenced Alien, I think The Thing from Another World is the film which influenced Aliens. Whether James Cameron was aware of that or not, I don't know. But there's the whole scene where they're detecting radiation. They're using a Geiger counter to try to detect how close the creature is. It's very reminiscent of the motion sensors that they use in Aliens, and the idea of this group of army men who are in this situation, and they're barricading themselves, and they're trying to come up with a way of surviving this creature's onslaught. Very reminiscent of Aliens as well. So I think that it's a movie which has influenced a lot of films since, and I would also say as well, there's a colour version of this movie. I wouldn't watch that. I would always watch this in black and white. It just looks far better in black and white. One of the criticisms some people have is that you do see the creature in all its glory at the end, and I do agree with that. You maybe see it a little bit too much, but they still, even though you see all of it, and the camera lingers on it, it's shot from a distance for the most part. So excuse me, my stomach's rumbling. So it certainly still keeps a bit of the mystery. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but in the DVD covers, I don't know if it was the film posters at the time had this as well. I think possibly they did. They do have a close up of the creature. I don't know why you would do that. You know, it just ruins the whole suspense of the whole thing. But I just love this film. I adore it. It's a film that, yeah, it has nostalgic, and a nostalgic attachment for me as well. I remember sitting watching it with my dad, and um, but it was a film that I remember from the very first time watching it, just blowing me away. When I was a kid, I watched it and it just totally impressed me, and it still impresses me to this day. And it's a movie which I still watch a couple of times every year. But that's all. I don't really want to bore you to death with how much I love this movie. But that's The Thing from Another World. If you haven't watched it, it's just an absolute must watch. And as a horror fan, even though it is science fiction as well, I have to say there's a couple of scenes in it which are really frightening. Some of them where you're kind of like involving fire, where you think, you know, people could have get seriously hurt when they were filming that. But there's one scene in particular with a door, and the timing of it still gets me to this day. So that's The Thing from Another World. Go and check that out, and I'll be back shortly with another horror movie review. Just a couple more to go now.